Before the bright red carpets, the royal titles, and the constant glare of global news cameras, there was a quiet television soundstage in Los Angeles. On that set, an Emmy award-winning lighting director took the time to teach his young daughter how to find her light. Thomas Markle did not simply raise Meghan. He spent decades working behind the scenes, using his own earnings to make sure she had every opportunity to succeed. Yet today, after years of painful silence, broken promises, and sudden health scares, an aging father makes a quiet decision to speak out one last time. Why would a father who once dedicated everything to his child reach a moment where he feels he must say goodbye to the camera forever? The answer uncovers a deeply human story about fame, family, and what happens when the distance between two different worlds grows too vast to cross. Long before the world recognized her as a royal figure, Meghan Markle was simply a young girl visiting her father at work. Thomas Markle Sr. spent his career as a highly respected lighting director on major Hollywood sets. He was a hardworking man who knew how to make others look brilliant under the spotlight. When his marriage to Meghan's mother came to an end, Thomas stepped up to remain a steady, constant presence in her daily life. He worked long hours to pay for her private school tuition, bought her first computers, and constantly encouraged her passion for acting. He shielded her from the harsh realities of the entertainment industry, offering a warm and safe environment to grow. To Thomas, Meghan was not just his daughter. She was his absolute proudest achievement in life. Their bond was formed in quiet moments, sharing takeout on set, driving to auditions, and talking about her big dreams. He gave her the confidence to stand in front of the camera, completely unaware that those same lessons would one day lead her into a world far beyond his reach. As Meghan grew into an adult and began booking her own professional acting roles, the simple balance of their father-daughter relationship began to shift. Thomas remained in his quiet, unassuming routine, while Meghan moved steadily closer to global fame. When news broke that she was dating a British prince, the quiet life Thomas had known in California was suddenly pulled into international attention. Photographers began camping outside his modest home, waiting for any sign of the man who raised the future royal. Thomas had spent his whole life working behind the scenes, but now the cameras were turned directly on him. What happens when a father's simple pride turns into a vulnerability that the international media is waiting to exploit? As rumors of the upcoming royal wedding filled the news, the pressure on Thomas Markle became unbearable. Dozens of photographers followed his every move in his quiet Mexican beach town. Unprepared for this level of public scrutiny, Thomas felt completely overwhelmed and alone. When a pushy photographer suggested staging a few positive photos, reading a book about Britain, or getting measured for a suit, Thomas foolishly agreed. He believed these photos would improve his public image and make his daughter proud. Instead, the plan backfired completely. Just days before he was set to fly to London, newspapers revealed that the photos were staged. The backlash was immediate and intense. Ashamed, embarrassed, and under massive emotional stress, Thomas suffered a severe heart attack. From a hospital bed, he had to tell his daughter that he could not walk her down the aisle. Phone calls between them grew tense and filled with panic. What was supposed to be the proudest week of a father's life turned into a complete collapse of trust. As millions of people around the world watched the grand fairy tale wedding on television, Thomas sat in a quiet hospital room thousands of miles away. He watched his daughter walk down the aisle alone, and then hand in hand with a prince. The gap between his modest reality and her new royal life had never seemed wider. In a matter of 48 hours, a single poor decision ruined decades of love and loyalty. The man who had spent his life guiding Meghan toward the spotlight was now locked out of her world entirely. He was left alone with his declining health, a ruined reputation, and a broken heart. Could a single mistake truly erase decades of love? Or was this misstep just the beginning of a public, irreversible collapse? In the months following the wedding, the silence between father and daughter became absolute. Phone numbers were changed, security protocols were put in place, and a deep emotional wall was built. Feeling cut off and desperate to explain his side of the story, Thomas made another critical error. He began giving television interviews. He hoped that speaking publicly would force a response or show his daughter how much he was hurting. However, each interview only pushed Meghan further away. To her, his statements felt like public betrayals. To him, they were his only remaining way to reach her. The psychological strain grew heavier on both sides of the Atlantic. Meghan was adapting to a demanding new life as a working royal under constant public judgment. She felt she had to protect her new family by setting strict boundaries. Meanwhile, Thomas felt discarded by the daughter he had supported for decades. The media fed on the conflict, turning private pain into daily entertainment. Private letters written in moments of deep sadness were eventually leaked to the press, leading to intense legal battles and public debates. The quiet, affectionate relationship they once shared was completely gone. In its place stood a network of lawyers, public relations teams, and endless headlines. Thomas realized too late that every word he spoke to the press added another brick to the wall separating them. The love was still there beneath the noise, but neither side knew how to reach across the growing divide without causing more damage. As years passed without a single conversation, would a major health crisis finally bring them back together, or widen the distance? As time moved on, the public interest gradually shifted, but Thomas Markle's personal struggles only grew worse. Living quietly far from Hollywood, he faced a series of life-threatening health challenges. A massive stroke stripped away his ability to speak clearly, forcing him to spend months in physical therapy just to regain his voice. Additional medical complications left him weak and bound to routine care. During these difficult years, his grandchildren Archie and Lilibet were born into the world. Thomas watched them grow through blurry news photographs and online stories, fully aware that he had never held them or heard their voices. The physical pain of his failing body was difficult, but the emotional burden of being a stranger to his own family was far worse. Former colleagues and distant relatives offered opinions to reporters, but the person he wanted to hear from most remained silent. Thomas spent long days reflecting on his life, his career, and the daughter he raised. He began to realize that time was no longer on his side. The anger that had once driven his public interviews slowly faded into a quiet, heavy grief. He no longer cared about defending his reputation or proving who was right and who was wrong. His only focus became the simple wish of an aging parent who knows his time is limited. He watched the clock tick away, holding on to a small hope that a private letter or a phone call might still arrive before it was too late. What happens when an aging parent realizes that their final wish might be the one thing they can never have? To understand why this family rift lasted so long, one must look closely at the completely different worlds Thomas and Meghan now inhabit. Meghan stepped into global stardom and high-level royalty, where self-preservation and privacy are essential for survival. From her perspective, cutting ties with toxic media dynamics and establishing strict emotional boundaries was necessary to protect her children and her mental health. She saw her father's media appearances as unsafe behavior that repeatedly betrayed her trust. On the other side of the ocean, Thomas lived a simple, modest life. He did not possess a team of advisors to guide his choices. From his point of view, those same boundaries felt like a cold and ungrateful punishment for a mistake made out of confusion and panic. He saw a daughter who had moved into a world of grand wealth and forgotten the humble roots he provided for her. Neither side was able to view the situation through the other's eyes. Meghan saw an unsafe past that threatened her family's peace, while Thomas saw a distant future that excluded him entirely. This psychological stalemate created an invisible fence that neither side knew how to cross. The tragic reality of their story is that both father and daughter were hurting, yet the very ways they tried to protect themselves made it impossible to heal the bond. Modern celebrity culture had turned a simple family conflict into an international spectacle, leaving no quiet room for two people to sit down, talk, and forgive one another. When pride, hurt, and public scrutiny build a barrier this high, can anyone make the first move to break it down? Aware that his health was continuing to decline, Thomas Markle made a deliberate choice to break his silence one last time. Sitting quietly in his home, looking worn by age and illness, he gave a final interview. But this message was noticeably different from his past appearances. There were no angry accusations, no defensive statements, and no complaints about the royal family. Instead, it was a simple, heartfelt confession from an aging father who recognized his own mortality. Thomas spoke softly, taking full responsibility for the mistakes he made in the lead-up to the royal wedding. He apologized for the public noise he created and acknowledged the pain he had caused. He made one clear request: to be allowed to speak with his daughter in private and to meet his grandchildren before his time ran out. He announced to the interviewer that this would be his very last public statement. He was closing the door on television appearances forever, choosing to leave his final words as a simple message of peace. The interview moved people across the globe. It struck a deep chord with viewers who understood how fragile family relationships can be. For the first time in years, the public saw not a tabloid subject, but a tired old man offering an olive branch. The interview ended quietly, leaving the message hanging in the air for his daughter to hear. With the message delivered and the cameras turned off, the world waited to see if a simple fatherly plea could heal years of deep wounds. The story of Thomas Markle and his daughter Meghan is far more than a collection of tabloid headlines. It is a sobering lesson about the human cost of extreme fame and public pressure. When ordinary family misunderstandings are dragged onto the global stage, small mistakes can easily become permanent separations. Thomas spent his early life working behind the scenes to help his daughter shine. In the end, that very same spotlight created a barrier between them that proved almost impossible to break down. His final statement leaves the world with a quiet, lasting truth. Royal titles, global fame, and public success mean very little if simple human connections are lost along the way. Whether forgiveness and healing happen privately behind closed doors is something the public may never know. But the public chapter of this father-daughter story has officially reached its end. It remains a quiet reminder for all of us about the importance of empathy, the fragility of family ties, and how quickly time can slip away when we let pride and misunderstanding stand in the way of love. Every family has its own complex story of distance, misunderstanding, and forgiveness. As you reflect on the journey of Thomas and Meghan Markle, think about the boundaries and bridges in your own life. What does it truly take to heal a broken relationship before time runs out? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.